Imagine, just for a second, trying to bring order to absolute total chaos. Well, today we're diving into a really fascinating explainer of an ancient survival guide. We're looking at a text that quite literally laid down a blueprint for early justice.
Think about the earliest days of civilization. I mean, we're talking about a time of blood feuds, stolen land, false accusations. So, how did ancient societies actually survive these massive threats to everyday order? Well, it turns out the source text of Deuteronomy 19 provides some incredibly innovative legal solutions to these exact problems.
Now, what's really interesting is how they handled manslaughter. The text uses this surprisingly cinematic example. Picture this. Two men are out chopping wood, right? And suddenly an axe head slips right off the handle, striking and killing the neighbor. It's a tragic accident. But, in the ancient world, an unintentional death like this could easily trigger a relentless, bloody feud.
So, to stop that violent cycle of revenge, the text outlines a brilliant solution: the establishment of exactly 3 specific cities of refuge. The rule was, if a slayer killed a neighbor ignorantly, by total accident, they could flee to one of these 3 cities to live in safety. And, actually, if their borders were ever enlarged later on, the text commanded them to add 3 more cities just to ensure a refuge was always within reach.
Now, we really need to draw a line here, because the text clearly contrasts the innocent slayer with the intentional murderer. The innocent person had no past hatred, they just needed protection from the avenger of the blood, which was essentially a hot-hearted relative seeking revenge. But the murderer? That's someone who actively hates their neighbor and literally lies in wait to do them harm.
So you might be wondering, what if the guilty tried to game the system? Well, sanctuary was absolutely not a loophole. If an intentional murderer fled there, the elders of his home city would simply go and fetch him right back. He was deliberately handed over to the avenger of blood to be put to death. This was to ensure innocent blood was completely purged from Israel.
Okay, moving beyond violent crime, the text shifts focus over to property rights, stating, "Thou shalt not remove thy neighbor's landmark." You have to remember, in a deeply agrarian society, secretly moving ancient boundary stones set in a family's inheritance was a direct, devastating attack on their livelihood. To put that into perspective, in the ancient world, it was basically the equivalent of secretly hacking into someone's bank account and draining their entire life savings.
Now, transitioning into the courtroom, how do you actually prove any of these crimes? The text declared that a single witness could never, ever rise up to convict someone of an iniquity or sin. One person's word just wasn't enough. To officially establish a matter, you absolutely needed the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses.
But what if a witness just lied? Well, the source details a remarkably strict investigation process. First, both men stood before the Lord. Then, they presented before the priests and judges. Next, the judges made a really diligent inquisition. And if a witness was proven false, oh boy, he received the exact punishment he intended for his brother. The whole idea was to put the evil away so the rest of the community, as the text says, shall hear and fear.
Which brings us to this incredibly iconic quote, "Life shall go for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth." Now, while that might sound incredibly brutal to our modern ears, in this specific context, it was actually meant as a limitation. It mandated exact proportional punishment for a malicious false witness. This was crucial because it prevented an endless, escalating cycle of overly vengeful retaliation. It's just so fascinating to realize how these ancient frameworks of intent, evidence, and proportional punishment laid the foundational groundwork for justice. It really leaves us to wonder, when you strip it all down, how much of our modern morality and legal systems is really just an echo of these ancient laws?